my name is Sarah Nyheisel. I'm one of our senior implementation specialists here at RedTeam, and we're going to be going over our RedTeam Flex release as of December 7th. So you may have seen our pre-release training. This is just going to be a reiteration of all those same topics. We're going to go over everything that was added or changed last Thursday, and we'll give you an in-depth look at this. Now, you'll notice I am showing you these slides in my web browser today because we're going to bounce back and forth between our slide presentation and actually jumping into a live database so that I can show you how all of these features work. Our agenda for today is right here. So we're going to be talking about the major updates is what you're seeing here. First, our simplified project setup form, which is going to help make your pre-construction processes and the setting up of new projects that much easier. We'll talk about our improved promote and demote interface, which is going to give you a lot more information about why you would want to promote or demote that project from one stage to another. We'll look at cost estimate updates in terms of our new cost estimate and some features that we've added in. We'll look at bid leveling and vendor quotes. We're going to have a whole new available feature there, and we're also going to talk about how you can choose to utilize that or not. It's definitely an optional feature as it is a major change for some of our existing clients. And then the last piece we'll cover would be cost plus billing and SOV updates for CMAR style projects. These are going to be specific to clients who have really open book style projects. We're going to see that we've had a little bit of additions and updates there. So before we begin, I want to let you take a look at, excuse me, let's pull out my screen here so that I can get rid of our side panel there. Give me just a moment, guys. Sorry. Okay, let's reshare. Okay, we will. There we go. Okay, sorry, just struggling to get you the right slide there. There we go. Before we move on, I want to make sure I introduce who's going to be with me today. That's going to be Austin. He's one of our other implementation specialists. He's going to be monitoring the Q&A today. So please go ahead and drop questions in there as you have them. He's either going to answer those for you as we move along in the Q&A, or if it's a question that can be applicable to everyone, I'll take some breaks along the way and we'll make sure we answer those live for everybody. So what are we going to talk about first? First is that simplified project setup. And you've probably already seen this. If you've been in your database between last Thursday and now, you've seen a little bit of new layout. We're going to talk about what tabs have disappeared and where you can find that information. But really, the reason that we instituted this project setup workflow is to try and make pre-construction easier and more efficient. We want to reduce the risk that someone forgets to take a certain step and make sure that we present everything in kind of the best practice order. So let's go take a look at that in a real database. We're going to jump over here. I'm already in a project, this Harper Stables and Racing. And as I create a new project, I'm going to end up jumping right into my setup form. So I've already got a project created, but if you were to come up here to the top menu and click Create New Project, or if you were to go to the Projects menu and hit the new icon, that form that you need to fill out to hit Save and create a new project is the same. What's different is the setup form that you're going to be dropped into as you hit Save to create that new project. So we're going to see that right here. You may be familiar with our gear icon that used to be here for project preferences. That's been replaced with this project setup button. So you can reopen that setup form at any time, but this is where I would appear the second I create my new project. Once I hit save, I'm dropped in here. And we can see that we are in draft stage of the project. We can actually change project statuses from here. We can move from draft to request to proposal, all without leaving the setup form. You'll see along the left-hand side the steps that are available to you in that stage of the project. So in a moment, we'll see a lot more steps appear, but in draft, we're just dealing with those key pieces of setting up our project: the scope details, project preferences, and plans and specifications. When I'm ready to move on to another step, I need to promote to the next stage of the project. But before we do that, I want to make sure you know all the ways to access this setup form and what tabs are disappearing because they've been replaced by this. So if we back out here, we're going to see that our team tab has actually been relabeled as our dashboard tab. And when we move forward, we're going to see that we've also gotten rid of our scope tab as well as our estimate tab. We're not going to need those anymore because, as you saw in the setup form, my scope details are included as step 1 in the setup form. I'm not going to need my estimate tab anymore because all the information housed there is going to be in the project setup form. But we do want you to note that we've just kind of renamed that team tab to dashboard. It just seemed more appropriate because you're dropping in to the project dashboard and you can still navigate to your team members page from there. But let's look at how else I can access the setup form. Of course, you've got your easy button over here, but if I hit the home icon, you're also going to see the ability to access project setup form from here. And all of your same pre-construction buttons are available here. If I click on one, it's going to open the setup form and take me directly to the step that I want to be in, right? So you can see it opened the form and it navigated me directly to step 3. So before we move on, I want to talk about how these steps may look a little different, right? Scope details is the same information you could expect to see in the scope tab before. No more scope tab, it's just here in step 1 of the setup form. As I scroll down, I can make edits to all these pieces of information. Notice I don't have to press an edit button anymore. I can just click and type. Information will lock itself in as you progress to stages of the project where that editing capability is no longer there. One of the only things we pulled out of the scope details page is the plan room settings. You'll notice that plan room settings are not here in the scope tab anymore. They're going to be shifted more appropriately into project preferences. So let's talk about this one. Project preferences are all parts and pieces of your project that you would be familiar with. We've just reorganized them. This preferences page here is essentially the same as the gear icon that you were used to back out there next to the project name. We've updated it, brought it in here so that you can access all of these preferences while you're setting up your project. What we found is that clients kind of had to know that this information was available in the gear icon. And if they weren't aware it was there, they could progress through their entire project without ever realizing that they had some of these preferences available to them. So we want to put them right up front so that as you get the project started, you can make decisions. There's a lot of different pieces of information in here. We also have separate pages for some items that you may be used to have accessing from the home icon. So if we come back out to the home icon, if we come here, you may have been used to accessing unit prices, things like that, cost codes, all that information from here. We now have it inside the setup form. And that's just, again, to put it right up front for you so that it's easy. You can set up your project phases. If you want to track your estimate and your budget into different project phases, you can. You can add cost codes right here and now if you'd like to. Otherwise, as your estimators are building that estimate, it's going to backfill this list for you. Cost categories, again, something you may want to set up as you get started estimating. Those can be set up here in addition to unit prices. Important to note that that unit prices list is still going to fill automatically using the negotiated price list in your customer facility. So if that's something you've been utilizing, that feature is still active. Otherwise, the last thing I want to note here is just that you do have a search bar. So if you'd like to search for certain preferences, you can do so. And you can access these preferences at any time during the project. You just come back to the setup form and click on step 2. Now with that, I'm just going to open this up and make sure. Okay, I don't see any questions at the moment. So we'll go ahead and move on to step 3. Plans and specs remains the same. This is functioning exactly the way you're used to. The only difference I want to point out is that we now have plans and specs and addendums in one location. So you can flip back and forth between your plans and your original plans and specs and your addendums as you see fit. Addendums is still only going to be available during draft and request stage. So once you move into proposal or in progress, again, you'll have to use a change order. You won't be able to add to these pages, but they're available side by side just to make life easier. Now, that's our draft stage pieces. And I think this gives you a good idea of the new project setup form, how to access what it's going to look like. We are going to move through some other pieces on the project setup form, like estimating. And to do that, we want to change our project status. Now I can still close this form, go out to the main page and click on draft in order to promote. But I want you to notice this nice change status button so that I don't have to click several times. I can just promote from here. This is the second update I want to make you aware of, which is this new interface for promote and demote. The same information is available in terms of moving forward or backward or changing your substatus, but you're going to see a lot more detailed presentation of what will be available in the next stage of the project. So I can see here that if I move backwards, if I demote, I'm canceling the project, and that's going to make all of my content read-only. If I move forward, I'm gaining the ability, see those green check marks, I'm gaining the ability to build an estimate, gather quotes, prepare my proposal. So we move forward, much the same as we have in the past. You can see I get all those additional steps. And if I come up here and change status again, I want you to see that as we promote to proposal, notice it's showing me all the things that I would be losing if I move forward, and I am seeing if I move back to draft, what kind of features am I losing and or gaining. So really just an improved amount of information for you to help you understand what you're gaining and losing as you change statuses. But with that, I'm going to hop right back over to our slides here for a moment. And we're going to look at our cost estimate enhancements, which is kind of minor if you're already using the new estimate, right? It's not a major change to how that new cost estimate looks, but I do think these features are going to be really useful and really important. What we're doing is we're adding back in a couple of those key pieces that you may have liked utilizing with the old cost estimate. So we've got a new user interface for adding cost codes that you'll see is just a little cleaner. We're adding back in assembly narratives, which is descriptions or detailed descriptions underneath each of those assembly items. We're going to allow you to access that variable item quantity and show on proposal checkboxes. And most importantly, for our Sage clients, you're going to see that your estimates now sort numerically, not alphanumerically. And why is that important? Because previously we had lots of Sage clients who found they had to add leading zeros to their cost code structure in order to make sure that they sorted properly on the cost estimate. No more. That will automatically handle itself numerically. You shouldn't need to worry about altering a cost code structure if you're a Sage client. So let's go over and take a look. Again, we're in the project setup form. We'll come down here to cost estimate. And remember, there is no more estimate tab. So even if I back out here, I cannot access my estimate through that estimate tab anymore. It's going to be a matter of coming into my home icon and clicking on estimate. Going to bring me right back into that project setup form. Now for adding cost codes, we click here and say add cost codes. You're just going to see a slightly different user interface where you can search for the cost code you want. As you hit enter, you're going to see those options pop up, and you can select your phases right from here. So if you built phases in project preferences, you'll be able to indicate which phase you want to assign these cost codes to. You'll see in my estimate, I used 3 phases, and I brought in the same cost codes into each phase because I wanted to track cast in place concrete separately from cast in place concrete up here in phase 1, right? I split mine out by building. The other piece that we want you to see is the ability to add assembly narratives and choose whether or not you want them to show on your proposal. So if you've been using the new cost estimate, you're already used to the point and click capability where you can click on anything blue and make edits. We've added this little more icon next to an individual assembly item. Again, if you're a user of the old cost estimate, you'll remember those assembly narratives, those detailed descriptions. We've brought those back here into the new cost estimate because we just find them to be really useful in terms of communicating to your vendors and in terms of sharing information in the scope of work section on your proposal. So I can go ahead, describe all concrete services here in as much detail as I want. And then I've got two checkboxes that may or may not be familiar to you. Show on proposal means, yes, I want this assembly narrative to be visible. I want this assembly item and its associated narrative to be available on the proposal. Variable item quantity means if I were to change the overall quantity of the cost code, I want you to multiply this assembly item by the same amount. The reason you might do that would be if you're building master assemblies and using them on a unit basis. For example, I estimate or break down the costs for a single apartment unit, and then I could come here and multiply by 12 if I'm building a building that has 12 units in it. That item there might remain unchecked. If you were to say this is kind of a single one-time fee, it shouldn't multiply as I multiply the overall cost code quantity. So those are really the major updates there in terms of cost estimating. Austin, do we have any questions at the moment that we should answer before we proceed?
No questions yet.
Perfect. Okay, then we're going to jump back over to that slide presentation and look at our next item, which is going to be bid packages and bid leveling. Now, this one I really think is probably the biggest change you're going to see. And because it's such a major alteration to the workflows that you might be used to in terms of request for quote processes, we've made it optional for use, especially for existing clients. So I'm going to show you first how to access it and turn it on. If you're not seeing the options that I'm showing you, we want you to have a conversation with your client success manager. There are some decision-making factors that you'll want to weigh when you decide if you're ready to start using our bid leveling feature, or if you want to continue utilizing the old request for quote processes. The major benefit here is it's faster and easier to build. It interacts more seamlessly with your estimate. And for anyone who wants to be able to send invitations to bidders for multiple cost codes, this is that solution you've been waiting for. So let's go take a look at how we turn it on, first of all. So it's already turned on in this project for me. But what we're going to see is in your configuration menu, your administrators are now going to have an option under the My Company section to turn on bid packages. And it's going to be this item here. Under project settings, they would check the box to upgrade to bid packages for all new projects. Now, if you're a client who's in implementation with us right now, we've gone ahead and auto checked this for you by default. If you're an existing client with us and you may have been utilizing the request for quote feature to date, we want you to have a conversation with your CSM. They should be reaching out to you to discuss that before you determine if you want all new projects to start using bid leveling. Right? You'll get a good look at it today. I'll try and point out some of the differences. But we are still working on another phase 2 of additional features for bid leveling and bid packages. So we want you to decide, right? Am I ready to move now, or do I want to wait for that phase 2 release? So once I've checked the box and determined that I do want to use bid packages on all new projects, I also have an option to turn it on any existing projects that don't yet have quotes. So let's go back to our example project and look at that. If we come back into our setup form and we look at our project preferences, it's going to be under the quotes section. So we're going to scroll down here. By the way, there's those plan room settings that you may be used to, not in the scope tab anymore, right here in project preferences. We come down to vendor quotes, you're going to have this checkbox for bid packages. You'll only see this and be able to utilize this if A, you are using the new cost estimate. If you're still utilizing the old cost estimate on any of your existing projects, it's not compatible with our new bid packages feature. So you'll need to continue using the old RFQ unless you're ready to shift that estimate to the new estimate. 2, you can't have any quotes on the project yet. So in this case, I can't deactivate it because I already have at least one bid package. If I was using the old RFQs, it would tell me you can't turn this on because you already have quotes on the project. So once you've started with one method, you're not going to be able to shift, but you'd be able to turn it on for every existing project that doesn't have quotes yet. If you turn that section on in My Company, right, your configuration, you said upgrade to bid packages. We will auto check this for you on all newly created projects so that you don't have to worry about it. Now, let's go take a look at what exactly bid packages are. To do that, we're going to come down to our cost estimate and we're going to click on the new icon. If that box is checked in project preferences and you're using the new cost estimate, you will see this option to add bid packages. A bid package allows you to build multiple cost codes into a package that you'd like to invite bidders to. So it's very different than our current system or our older RFQ system, where you would create a request for quote cost code by cost code. In that case, if I wanted the same vendor to handle rough and finish carpentry, I would have to send that vendor two separate invitations, one for rough carpentry, one for finish carpentry. I'd have to gather two separate quotes from them. This really streamlines that process. And what I really want you to note is the bidirectionality here, because I can start by building an estimate and then segment that into bid packages, or I can build a bid package and have that backfill my estimate. So I'm going to show you an example of what I've already got built, carpentry and masonry, right? We can come in and see our bid packages from here. We segment the estimate into a bid package where we said, hey, carpentry includes rough and finish carpentry. I invited my bidders and I can go ahead and select as best from here. I'm going to create a new bid package for plumbing, right? So that's not something that's in my estimate already. If we come here and add a bid package, it starts out blank. And what I'm going to do, the first thing I want to do is name it. Right, I can click and name it whatever I'd like. Note over here, you've got a little more icon. These are features that you might have been used to if you're using RFQs. When you're generating that RFQ, you'd set the due date, attach any files that you want in addition to plans and specs, and choose your requester from your team, right? So these are parts and pieces of information that will go out on the invitation to bid. You can put any special instructions to bidders here. And as we close, all of that auto saves. Notes here. We put any internal notes for our team. We can come back and edit those at any time. Now, the way we want to build out the bid package is by first adding the cost codes. Now, when I built those masonry and carpentry bid packages using items that were already in my estimate, I said assign cost codes. Assign cost codes is going to show me a list of the cost codes that exist within my project, and I can go ahead and check box which ones should show up in this bid package. Well, I've already done masonry and rough carpentry, and carpentry, excuse me. So if I want to do plumbing and I haven't already built it into my estimate, I can choose to add cost codes. This requires the permission to add a new cost code to the project, but it allows me access to all of my cost codes, and I can go ahead and search for plumbing. Now I can find any of my plumbing cost codes that I want, and I can add them, right? Could be 2 cost codes, could be 10 cost codes, however many you need to add. The important piece about this is to note that this is a fully functioning mini estimate. Notice I assigned these to phase 1. I could go ahead and add more cost codes for phase 2, the same or others, right? We can grab those same cost codes and add them in, right? We could add for phase 3 as well if we want. As I'm adding them here, they're showing up on my estimate over here. So I can build out my assemblies, I can put in my anticipated costs, and then I can add my bidders. So I could come in here and build out all of these into multiple line items. I could flesh out those assembly narratives like we just talked about. I can put in units of measure, unit costs, and quantities here. But again, if I don't want to, I've seen a few clients who don't want to fill in their estimate until they've gathered their bids. That's okay as well. You can go ahead and pull in the cost codes, and then add your bidders right from here. Right, and this allows me to search through by name. I could search for anyone with the word plumbing in their name, or I can access search filters right here. The same ones that you've always had with that request for quote process. When we search for vendors, we can search for vendors we already have experience with, meaning we've worked with them before, folks that have the right trades. Now, we've actually simplified that. Instead of requiring you to list cost codes that you want to search for, we can say, I want to search for any vendors who have these cost codes that are in this bid package in their trade section, or who have that cost division in their trade section, right? So if they're similar. Notice off to the right, you're seeing a little number in parentheses. That's indicating to you how many vendors in your system meet that criteria. So you know how many you're going to have to choose from if you narrow it down. How far are they from the job site? That looks at their vendor profile address as compared to the worksite address. Credentials and qualifications. If you've used qualifications, you'll know that that's a customizable list of search features. I can look for folks who are authorized to work with federal projects. I can look for people who operate in my Northeast region. Anything I can think of, I can create a qualification for and then check the box to search for vendors who fit that. Credentials are, of course, documentation that you have on file. I want to see only folks who already have a W-9 on file, and it's going to narrow that down for you. So lots of search capability there. We can go ahead and choose a couple of vendors and add them, and then we're going to see them drop in over here. Now, once they're added, we're going to see their status down at the bottom, which is letting you know that the RFQ, the request for quote, has not been sent. So those invites we're going to send on the vendor quotes page the same way we always have. But I want you to note a few capabilities for editing in here. If we click here, we can view the RFQ right from here. We can remove this bidder if we changed our mind about inviting them. We can open their quote card. This is one of the key pieces or considerations that you'll want to think about before you decide if you're going to start using our bid leveling feature, which is in this phase 1 of bid leveling. You will not have access to digital submission of quotes. And what that means is I send out the RFQ. Instead of seeing that red upload quote button where the vendor can drag and drop their file and it just appears into RedTeam for me, they're just going to have to reply to the email and attach the file. And then you would come in here to the quote card and drag and drop that file when you receive it. So it's not too terribly much more effort, but it is something to be aware of, because instead of the vendor being able to drop that file into RedTeam themselves, you'll have to come here and do it for them. Again, do keep in mind, we're already working on phase 2 of this release in which we intend to bring back some convenient shortcuts. But that one's not available at the moment. So you drag and drop it right here. And as you do, it's going to update the status to a draft quote, right? To let you know that you've got a quote in there. Down here, you can also update status anytime you want, right? So if you want to indicate whether they will or will not bid, right? Maybe they text you or reply to the email and say, sorry, I don't have time to bid on this one. You can go ahead and mark that. It's also going to change on its own if they go ahead and reply via the email, right? They'll have the ability to mark that. Now, as we receive quotes, we'll want to be checking off what items are included, because you're going to go ahead and upload their quote file in here in their quote card. And you can put in their total quote value and any bidder notes, but you will also want to delineate how much of that quote value goes to each line item, right? So maybe they can provide these 2 cost codes, but they can't provide the third one. And then Sunray gives me a quote and they can provide the third one, but not the others, right? I can indicate that. And then what you're going to see is this status has changed to draft. Once I'm sure the quote is in and all the numbers are accurate, I can go ahead and commit it as final. And I can compare quote amounts right here. So because I don't have an estimate amount, I'm not able to take advantage of these comparison features down here. But if I had gone ahead and put in some values of my own, I can start to see comparison down here below. So let's put in a little bit of value here. Right, what that allows you to see is what they've left out. So here's my estimated amount compared to each quote amount. Why is Sunray so much lower? Because they left out $12,200 worth of items. So it's allowing me to see if I went with them and I still bought out those remaining items at $12,200, what would I be spending? That's the should cost comparison. We're also going to subtract out any extra items. If they bid on any items that are already covered and selected in another bid package, we would subtract that out of their value so that you can compare apples to apples here. So that's really it in terms of our bid package. Do note that you can go ahead and export this to an Excel spreadsheet if you want. If you want to import it into another estimate, you've got that capability. You have the ability here to access some of those same cost estimate reports on this page. But otherwise, you toggle back and forth between your bid package and your estimate right here. You can come back to any of those bid packages at any time. And in fact, I'm going to come back in and remove this quote and put this one in RFQ not sent so that you can see how we send those out from the next page. But Austin, do we have any questions at the moment on the bid package feature?
No questions here.
Perfect. All right, then let's go ahead and jump over here to our vendor quote improvement. Really, what we've done here is we've updated the interface in terms of your vendor quotes page. We want it to be easier to see what's going on and where things sit. It's really nice and clean. It's going to allow you to arrange the columns the way you want to see them and send items out in groups as you're used to. Let's go ahead and come over and take a look. Again, that's step 5 in our new project setup form. What you're seeing here is visibility on each bid package. So where if you're not using this new bid leveling feature, you're seeing items organized by cost code, and you can continue doing it that way. But if you're using the new bid packages, you're automatically going to get this new vendor quotes page. And you can collapse and expand each bid package. You can see those statuses are marked really nicely and color coded. And then our columns, like we said, can be rearranged. So if we want to put the status over here and the due date down at this end, we can do that. We simply drag and drop. We have the ability to click on this more icon next to any item, any column, sort ascending or descending, choose which columns we do and do not want to see. If you have one that doesn't matter to you, you can go ahead and turn it off and come back in and turn it back on at any time. You've also got the ability to filter by keyword for any of these columns if you'd like. Notice you've still got your notes option here where you can click open and keep notes about this particular item. And then you've got your metadata log so you can see what's going on. You notice as I checkbox items, we're going to see that email button. One of the key pieces I want to mention here, because it confused me the first time I looked at vendor quotes, is there's no tools icon. And that's tricky for those of us who are used to RedTeam. Everything is done through the tools icon. So the first time I saw it, I said, well, where is it? How do I commit these RFQs? And in the case of this one, for example, RFQ not sent, how do I commit these and send them out? The answer is you don't have to. They're going to be generated as a final copy. There's no draft or committed status for an invitation or an RFQ. You would edit the features on there, things like the due date, the attached files, these special instructions, all of that is done through the bid package like we just saw. So that leaves me ready by the time I get here to just email it out. If you want to preview it beforehand, you've got the view icon where you can view that invitation in a separate browser tab. Right here, we can see, again, no draft watermark. I don't need to commit it. I just go ahead and email it out. It's going to be all the same information you're used to, except again, they're not going to see a big red upload quote button when they open it. They'll just reply with their quote file, and you'll drop that into the quote card in the bid package. Now, other things you'll see is once that file is uploaded, you'll get a little paperclip icon right here. So if we had a file added through the bid package, we would be able to access that file right here if you want to look at anyone's individual quote. Again, when it comes to deciding, do I want to use bid leveling right now, or do I want to wait until maybe that phase 2 comes out? Notice that some of the shortcuts you may be used to are not going to be here with this first release of bid leveling or the vendor quotes page, because if I checkbox these, I just see email. I don't have the ability to edit en masse or delete en masse the way you may have been used to. I don't have a tools icon to turn a quote directly into a subcontractor purchase order. So like this one with 5-Star Masonry has been selected as best. I don't have a way to turn it directly into a quote right now. I would simply have to go to the buyout tab, create a commitment, and put that value in step 3. So there's no saying you can't use this quote to make a commitment. We're just saying the shortcut's not here right now. So just things to be aware of. Now, the last thing we want to talk about is select as best. Assuming I've got my bids, where's my tools icon or my star to compare? Again, that's going to be back in the bid package. A lot of that editing and all those comparison features are going to occur over here. So we come back here to our plumbing services bid package, and we could go ahead and let's again mark this one as a draft. We'll say they bid $1,200. Right, as we look at these draft quotes, we can commit them if we don't need to make any more changes. And then we can compare and select as best. Select as best is still going to perform those same 2 features. It's going to update your cost estimate and therefore your total price proposed to the customer. And it's going to offer you the capability to include that quote in your proposal if you'd like to include a list of selected quotes. So we'll go ahead and select it as best. You can see it highlights yellow. It leaves me open to select someone else as best for the remaining items. So if I had other bidders who bid on phase 2, or if I want to choose Sunray for this sanitary and vent piping, I can go ahead and select multiple vendors in a bid package as best, so long as I'm not selecting them for items that overlap. Right? Only one person can be selected as best for each cost code within the bid package. But I could select 5 different vendors to perform all of this work if I want, or I could select one. It's up to you, and you can always come back here and change your mind. Move them back to committed. It's going to replace that value in your estimate with what you originally typed in. And again, in case I forgot to show you, let's go back to that estimate and notice that everything we created in that plumbing bid package showed up right here in my estimate. I didn't have to come put it in here separately. It's already here. It does that for you. So I love the bidirectional capability there when you're adding bid packages. If you left something out of your estimate, you can build a bid package for it and it's going to drop it right in there, or vice versa. So with that, I think that covers our vendor quotes and our cost estimate. We're going to move on to progress billing updates, which again, these updates that we're talking about are going to be for our clients who are using the link SOV to budget feature. It's really only available if you have that SOV linked to the budget, and we're going to show you how to do that. If you are utilizing that feature, we're going to have a new AIA style bill for you. So we're going to show you that new billing format if you'd like. And we're also going to show you a new format for attachments in terms of cost plus billing. So first thing to note is that if I want to use the new AIA style billing format, I would need to be linked to my SOV, link budget to SOV. Once that's activated, you're going to be familiar with the fact that you're going to see additional columns here in your schedule of values, right? The original scheduled value, any changes and budget adjustments, and there's the adjusted value. We want to be able to display this same type of detail on the customer bill. So that's where we've added in the additional billing format. So let's go ahead and promote this to in progress so that I can show you a bill. And while we're looking at that bill, we're also going to show you what's new in terms of cost plus billing, which is really going to be that instead of including those backup documents or those actual cost documents as hyperlinks, we're going to have the capability for you to include those as previews or separate pages. So let's go ahead and back out of our project setup form here. We're going to go over to our billing tab, and we're going to open up this draft bill that I've been creating. The formatting looks much the same, but I want you to notice that if your SOV is linked to your budget, you're going to see this additional AIA style format. So you'd be used to the 1992 and the 1987 G702, 703. The new one that we've added is the 703 CW, and that's only available if your SOV is linked to your budget. But if you do choose it, then we're going to come down and view it in a moment. It's going to add some columns in terms of your schedule of values or your continuation sheet. The other thing I want to talk about before we preview the bill is that if you're utilizing Cost Plus, we're going to have the capability to include all those actual cost documents that you're linking in as separate pages, right? What we had was a lot of clients giving us feedback that their customer didn't want to have to click on dozens of hyperlinks to see those backup documents. In that case, we went ahead and added the capability so that when I come in here and I select items to be included, those will be, let's see if we've got one in here. Those will be attached. So if I take a vendor invoice or an employee timesheet or something like that from not yet included, and I include it in this bill, those actual files are going to be visible on the bill. So let's go ahead and take a look here. We're going to view the bill. Again, remember, this is that new G703 CW format. The difference here is that in the continuation sheet, you're now going to see column C1 and C2, and then a column C, right? So we've got the original scheduled value, any authorized change orders that affected that line item, and the new total. You're also going to see column G split out. Stored and completed to date will be both a dollar value and a percentage. Same with retainage over here in column I. We've got an amount and a percentage. And then as we come down here, what you're going to see is that I included an invoice from 5-Star Masonry on that masonry line item. So you see the hyperlink here as you're used to and the value, but down here, you're actually seeing that invoice as a separate page. So we're going to offer now both the hyperlink and the backup document. If you're including something like an adjusting entry or an invoice where you didn't upload a file, we'll go ahead and show like a RedTeam generated receipt here to kind of give the details of that transaction. But that's going to be available anytime you use Cost Plus billing. These additional columns are only going to be available if your SOV is linked to budget and you're utilizing that G703 CW. So those are items related to the bill. We do have one last thing we want to take a look at over in our SOV. And that's going to be that if your SOV is linked to budget, you're going to see some additional type options for your schedule of values. So if we come back in here, we click on schedule of values. I do want you to notice that's opening our project setup form. So again, I can still come to the home icon and use all the buttons I'm familiar with, jumping me right into that project setup form. When it comes to building your schedule of values, if we add a new item, or even if we're importing an item, you may be used to this type, which traditionally has been SOV, profit, or overhead are your options. Now, if my SOV is linked to budget, we get a lot more capability to break this down. You're going to have allowance, cost of work, and general conditions, where in place of what you did have, which was just schedule of values. For those really open book or CMAR style projects, we want to make sure that folks have the ability to be more specific about whether a line item is a cost of work item or something else. So those options will be available for you to choose from only if SOV is linked to budget. Now, I think that, and that's, forgot to come over here to the slide for you, but that's our last update, right? In terms of the benefits, we're just allowing you to easier distinguish those items on CMAR projects, allow you to be a little more transparent with your customers. But that's really all we have intended to cover for today. Austin, do we have any questions we want to address?
No questions.
Okay, guys, well, I will leave things open here for a few moments, just in case anybody has any questions. Feel free to drop those in the chat. Otherwise, if you signed up and you registered for this, we'll be sending you a copy of this recording and the slide deck so that you can look back on this. And we definitely encourage you to reach out to us if you have any questions as you start using these features. But thank you so much for joining us.